Thank you first of all for the lovely introduction. Hi everyone, my name is Ananta Soneji. I'm a third year PhD student from Arizona State University, and today I'll be presenting our work on the investigation of security peer review process. From the great work by Davide Balzarotti, we observed that the academic security community is experiencing an exponential increase in its paper submissions. And not just that, this significant growth is introducing many challenges and issues throughout the review process. Members of the community are sharing their frustrations and experiences with these issues through blog posts, panel discussions, and even platforms such as Twitter. And those who are not directly involved with the review process, like the majority of us authors, we are not fully aware of how the peer review process works. More specifically, what goes between submission and decision can be more or less like a black box to us. We are more often unaware of how the science of security is evaluated. So in this work, we use qualitative analysis techniques to investigate the peer review process of evaluating security papers. Thorsten Holz, one of our program chairs for Oakland 2022, already explained in great detail how the security or how the reviewing process went for IEEE S&P 2022 during the opening remarks. But just to give a brief idea of how a typical top-tier security venue peer review process would look like, so this is how it would go. A paper that is submitted to one of the top 4 venues would typically go through the paper assignment process by chairs with the help of bidding from reviewers. PC members can request some papers to review if they are interested in reviewing those. Then after the assignment process, papers would go through several rounds of reviewing, including early rejections. Based on the initial reviews, authors may want to submit a rebuttal. A rebuttal is a chance for authors to convince the reviewers and highlight the significance and importance of their work. Some of the papers might even be selected for PC discussions or for extensive PC discussions before getting a decision on those papers. Awesome. So by now you all know that we wanted to investigate the security peer review process. We decided to interview the peer in the peer review. We started with a list of PC members who had served at least twice at top tier venues. We then randomly sampled 70 to send out invitations. 21 of those agreed to have an interview with us, and 12 even had a chairing experience. So over the years, the community has seen such informal discussions about issues or experiences with the review process, such as complaints about review randomness or negative reviews, or even exhaustion with rolling the submission deadlines. What we wanted to do in this work is get a more holistic view and understand from our experts what they thought were the systemic issues in the review process. After the long qualitative investigative process, we came across many insights from our participants. Learning from these insights, we learned what were the persisting issues in the review process. Many of our participants collectively complained about randomness of reviews. Randomness typically exists in the review process when reviewers draw different conclusions on the same paper. From our interview, one of our participants, P7, mentioned that there is a considerable amount of randomness, even at top venues, in who gets to review, what they think of it, how the discussion goes, and who is advocating for those papers. Because of this randomness, authors might want to keep resubmitting without making changes to their papers and try out their luck. Many members of the community may consider this as gaming the system. So P7, again, in their interview said that we as authors or reviewers cannot get angry at this behavior of authors. And they expanded their response by saying this: if we can be more accurate in our reviews, then yeah, gaming the system is a horrible thing to do. But we are not, it works. And so somebody whose job depends on getting these papers in, why would you blame them for doing something that works? So another influencing factor that we learned from our insights is rolling submission deadlines. With the increase in paper submissions, the academic security community also observed the advent of rolling submissions with major revisions. Several years ago, authors were forced to manage their paper submissions to meet a singular deadline per conference per year. To improve the reviewing process, the concept of rolling submissions was introduced, where authors can now enjoy the feasibility and flexibility with their submissions. But some of my fellow authors might also be struggling with procrastination. An interesting opportunity that comes along with rolling submissions with major revisions is that now authors can revise their papers upon feedback from reviewers. We have observed that the community is also experiencing or experimenting with this model, such that when IEEE Security and Privacy introduced rolling submissions in 2018, they had 12 deadlines, and they had the same model until 2020. They moved to 4 deadlines in 2021, and now in 2022, we had 3 deadlines. Moreover, the decisions or final outcomes that a paper can expect from the top venues is also not consistent. We feel that the community is still experimenting how to utilize rolling submissions to its maximum potential. And not just authors, but reviewers are also experiencing this new challenge of adapting with the changing model of rolling submissions. This led to us wondering what our participants thought of this revised model of rolling submissions with major revisions from the reviewers' perspective. Our participants mentioned that rolling submissions or the revised model was good to have to review more fairly, and it even increased the review quality. The possibility of dialogue that came with the revised model helped convey reviewers' expectations instead of going into the vicious cycle of rejections and resubmissions. Moreover, one of our participants, P10, said that the revised model is forcing reviewers now to write more constructive reviews. Apart from the obvious downfalls of the rolling submissions, I want to highlight an interesting negative sentiment here. One of our participants mentioned that now with the revised model, reviewers focus only on how ready the paper is versus how significant the paper is. One of our participants, P7, summed up the negative sentiment on the revised model and said that it was a growing pain to switch from single shot to rolling deadlines. Here I have graded some of the negative sentiments to show that they were commonly mentioned by our participants and is also the general observation from the community. Using this opportunity, I wanted to highlight some uncommon issues where we as a community can pay attention to. So up until now, we talked about the security review process, the issues that our participants felt with the review process, and the new change that came in the review process of rolling submission deadlines with major revisions. Let us go deeper and understand how security papers are evaluated at top-tier venues. We asked all of our participants, which evaluation metrics do you use to evaluate security papers? Among the many different responses that we got from our participants, we observed that none of the evaluation metrics were common among all of those. This observation of ours was supported by one of our participants, P13, who had chaired a conference before, when they said in their interview that security is an area where there are not any kind of hardened established metrics for evaluating security. However, our participants shared certain evaluation criteria. From here, you can see that novelty was mentioned by most of our participants. But did our participants mean the same when they said novelty? Not really. Novelty was the only evaluation metric where we observed many subjective responses from our participants, in the sense that some of our participants said that they're evaluating novelty of a paper through comparisons and advancements over previous work, whereas others mentioned that they're looking for a novel method, novel technique, novel solution, or novel insight from the paper. One even said that we are looking for a wow element in the paper. So we observed that among our participants, novelty was in some sense a judgment call, and they used it as a catch-all term. This observation of ours was also supported by the chair participant P19 when they said that novelty is definitely subjective. This is something where different reviewers will see different values out of a paper. Novelty is possibly multidimensional in itself in terms of what are we learning from this and what information from this is valuable. In an attempt to understand how security papers were evaluated, We also came across 52 red flags that were mentioned by our participants, which we have tried to categorize into 3 overarching themes. Red flags are certain indicators in a paper that reviewers identify to recommend a reject for that paper. Interestingly, the number of red flags, 52 here, is almost 3 times the number of evaluation metrics mentioned by our participants. This may show that security researchers look for concrete details when they want to recommend reject. One of our participants, P9, mentioned that we know that the acceptance rate is so low at these conferences that sometimes there can be a tendency from the reviewer side to look for reasons to reject instead of reasons for accepting a paper. Whereas another participant, P10, said that, but I think it's important to fight that instinct and to always frame reviews constructively and positively. We have discussed many interesting topics in our paper, so if you are interested, please go check them out. Before concluding my talk, I would like to discuss some of the recommendations that we have mentioned in our paper, which we believe would be helpful for the community. These recommendations might not be immediately actionable, but we feel that they will definitely stir deeper discussions within the community. Further, these recommendations are based on the findings from our paper and inspired by the discussions with our participants, and they're further expanded based on our understanding and deliberations of the review process. From our interview data, we observed that many of our participants were not able to start reviewing early on. A quote from our participant P17 is an example. So to help reviewers with timely review submissions, we make certain recommendations. Some of the PC members or reviewers might be ambitiously accepting many PC invitations. To avoid delegation and last-minute high-level reviews, we recommend that program chairs request reviewers to limit their concurrent PC memberships. Program chairs can ask reviewers to submit paper summaries earlier than the reviewing submission deadline to ensure that reviewers do not postpone even to start reading the paper at the last minute. Many of our participants complained about negative reviews, just as the community is complaining about negative reviews. We recommend that program chairs design a list of quality indicators to monitor reviewers' performance. They can utilize the characteristics of high-quality reviews that we have discussed in the paper as a starting point. Program chairs can recognize good reviewing with a letter describing their valuable contribution, or they can motivate reviewers to strive for quality with a good reviewer award. Among the new changes made to the review process of ACM CCS 2022, they mentioned that they will now be actively removing PC members who fail to provide timely and high-quality reviews or even fail to participate in the active discussions, in the active rebuttal phase. From this, we can see that the community is not just realizing its issues, but has started to act toward its mitigation. In the beginning of my presentation, I mentioned that the review process is more like a black box to many of us authors. So one way that we can make the process or part of the process more transparent is by including a summary of PC discussions along with the final decision that we get on our paper. This way, authors will feel that they have been acknowledged for submitting their rebuttals, as well as it will help these authors to better understand their final decision. Another example of improving transparency is involving bigger audience in the discussions of the newly proposed changes, such as the extended discussion that happened during when IEEE Security and Privacy introduced the new change of rolling submissions in 2018. Overall, we as a community can bring vast audiences and have different perspectives on some of the discussions or some of the proposed changes that we feel can be included in the review process. Okay, so what we can do as a community going forward? Firstly, we can be positive and show more interest in our review process. Further, we can design investigative studies to understand what's working and what's not in our review process. And we hope that the community eventually will move toward a testing-based approach to bring refinements to its review process. Thank you all very much for listening. I would like to extend my special gratitude to our participants and reviewers for their time and contributions. Also, thank you to those who tweeted their opinions about the review process on Twitter and other informal platforms. And yeah, thank you to my amazing lab mates for being here.
Thank you for the amazing talk. Does anyone have questions immediately? I can see Ben walking up.
Yes. Right. Hi, Ben Stock from CISPA. Very interesting and fascinating work. 2 questions.
Okay.
Did your paper get accepted right away here?
Accepted, sorry?
Right away, or did you have a major revision?
No. Yeah, we used the revised model.
Okay, cool. And the second thing is, people tweeting will never tweet, hey, this was good about the reviewing process, right? They will always tweet, everything sucks.
Yeah.
Did your participants have anything positive to say at all about the reviewing process?
Yeah, I did mention some of the positive components or positive sentiments on the rolling submissions. So what we wanted to do is we never asked our participants in our questionnaire that what are the issues with certain things. For example, we asked 3 topics regarding the review process, rolling deadlines or the revised model, delegation process, and the overall sentiment or the overall thoughts on the review process. So we do not prime our participants into saying that, oh, just talk about the negative points. We just ask, what do you feel about these things? What are your opinions on these things? So yeah, we got both the sentiments, positive and negative sentiments for these 3 topics. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Noel, University of Maryland. Obviously, security is an extremely broad discipline when it comes to areas of study for the reviewers. I was curious if that came up at all in your feedback, right? You know, one of the challenge I can imagine is like, oh, we have a lot of people who work on crypto, but not a lot of people who work on human factor stuff. And so did that kind of disparity or anything that's sort of made up disparity, but did that ever come up in the comments from your participants?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, something that interestingly came up in our interviews was that the community or the reviewers, and in the sense that reviewers and authors are mostly motivated by hype, in the sense that if papers of certain area are getting accepted, then more people will write papers on those topics. So basically, the community will see more interest in certain area in certain period of time, then there will be saturation, and then people will move to different topics. So that's what we observed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Alex Ganton, Qualcomm. So I'm kind of an outsider to the academic publishing process, so perhaps a naive question. Do the reviewers, do they get guidelines for what to look for, or is it just passed on through tribal knowledge and apprenticeship? You do it long enough and you pick up the habit of what to look for?
Reviewers in the sense of reporting or writing the reviews?
Well, or for deciding which papers to select and writing the reviews, right?
Yeah.
Are there kind of established guidelines for what to look for, or?
Okay, yeah. So I have never reviewed a paper before, but from what I've understood from my advisors and others who have reviewed security papers, is that program chairs do send out an instruction guideline as to, okay, you have to follow these steps at each phase of the review process. That's what I know.
Okay, thanks. And I guess you indirectly answered the quick follow-up, but the paper submitters don't know what those are, so they have to kind of reverse engineer this process by basically through an Oracle access. Wouldn't it make sense for the paper writers to know what the what the acceptance criteria are?
Obviously, we as authors are never aware of what those instructions are for the reviewers as to how they should follow the review process or reviewing process. This was an attempt to uncover some of those parts of the review process. We have discussed in our appendix what are the criteria that our participants mentioned when they want to recommend and accept for the paper. So if you want, you can check it out. And yeah, further research or future work can show more interest in specific parts of the review process and uncover other interesting things from those.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, let's thank our speaker again. Thank you so much for your work.